Welcome to the video lecture on IO management. I am Professor Rekha Kulkarni, and today I will be dealing with the contents related to the IO management, wherein we are going to deal with the various IO devices, in what way they are able to communicate with the system, and in what way these IO devices are the IO devices will become part of the operating system, and what are the various ways of organizing the disk, and in what way, as we know, the disk has got various tracks, and within these tracks there are the sectors. So what are the different algorithms using which to schedule the disk request by the process, and in what way the operating system deals with what are the different ways of disk scheduling, which is generally followed by the operating system. So let us start with the operating system and the device drivers, which are basically responsible for providing a way for an providing an interface between the operating system and the user programs or the application programs. As we know, every computer system has to process the information. Along with processing of the information, it has to manage the different IO devices, and every IO device provides a different functionality, and the type of the operating system is different. The functionalities provided by these IO devices are different. So while providing a uniform interface to the application programs, the kernel has got an IO subsystem using which the different devices will communicate, or it acts as an interface between an application program and the system calls, which are responsible for execution of any of the IO operations which will be requested by the application program. Device drivers basically play a very important role in managing these devices, and they provide a uniform device access interface to the application program. And whenever a device has to communicate with the system, as we know, the system has got different type of ports, like we have the serial ports, the parallel ports, and every port actually, in terms of implementation, it is a set of registers using which the communication takes place between a device and the system. And in terms of the bus, if I have a set of wires, if I have to connect two different systems, it is being done with a set of wires which we refer as a bus. And as we know, for every system, in order to have a communication among the different parts of the system and with the outside world in terms of IO devices, there is a bus which is very prominent, which is being referred as the PCI bus, which acts as a backbone for connecting different devices and different parts of the system, which can be seen in this particular figure. As we can see here, there is a parallel port and there are the serial ports, there are the controllers. All these devices and the parts of the system are also getting connected to this PCI bus. So the PCI bus acts as a backbone for connecting different type of devices and the different parts of the system together, so that it can work as a system. As can be seen here, as can be seen in this particular diagram, every device, whenever it has to communicate, it has to be through the device driver part. So this device driver provides an interface, and it is a part of kernel IO subsystem. As it is seen in this particular figure, there are the various components of the kernel IO subsystem. As this can be seen here, there are the device drivers for the keyboard, there is a device driver for the mouse, there is a device driver for the PCI bus, and even if the older PCs which were supporting the floppy devices, there was a device driver which is to support to the floppy devices. And nowadays whatever we see is in terms of the USB ports. So USB port has become very popular nowadays, which is also a serial bus, but and it also supports the plug and play devices. So as it can be seen in this diagram, the IO subsystem which which has all the device drivers supports different type of IO devices, and application program can communicate with these devices with the help of the drivers. So, and as it can be seen in this particular table, there are the various different type of devices. There is a change in the type of the devices and the access methods, the in what way the transfer will take place, the data transfer will take place between them, what are the different modes, all those things can be seen in this example, which is in terms of characteristics of the IO devices. So IO devices has got different data transfer rates, there can be different access methods, there can be different transfer schedules, there can be in what way the IO devices is getting shared with different processors which are requesting for the devices, what can be the speed of these devices, and what is the different type of IO directions. So these are all the various characteristics of the IO devices. And whenever we say there are the devices, these devices, the speed at which these devices can communicate with the system may vary. So in order to have the bridging between the speeds or between the sizes, there is a technique which has been used and which is being referred as buffering. As it can be seen here, a buffer, it's a memory area that stores the data being transferred between two devices or between a device and an application. And basically the buffering is used for three main reasons. One, which is being referred as to bridge the speed mismatch between the producer and the consumer for a data stream. And the other reason for using the buffering is to bridge the different data transfer sizes, which generally happens with the network sync, with the networks wherein the speed can be different. And the third use of buffering is to support the copy semantics for an application IO. The meaning of copy semantics here is the latest version should be available. A version of the data returned to the disk is always guaranteed to be the version at the time of application system call, independent of any subsequent changes in the application's buffer. So to provide copy semantics and to bridge the data transfer sizes and to bridge the data transfer rates, a technique called buffering is always used with the IO devices, or there can be something called, there exists something called no buffering, wherein there cannot be a support for a buffering, or there cannot be any dedicated memory area which is used to provide buffering among the memory and the devices. And coming to the disk scheduling algorithms, as we know, basically the disk area is being organized into the sectors, tracks, and being a sector is the smallest unit of information, the data storage which is being provided by the disk. So while locating the particular sectors, whenever there is a request from an application program to read a data or to write a data, along with the request, it also gives the how many sectors have to be read in, how many sectors have to be written. So all that information will be provided as a part of system call. So whenever any disk scheduling has to be done, the locating a particular sector is of very much important. And in accessing the disk, there are two major components. One is being referred as the seek time, and the other one is being referred as the rotational latency. The seek time is the time for the disk arm to move the heads to the cylinder containing the desired sector, and the rotational latency is the additional time for the disk to rotate the desired sector to the disk head. And the other terminology which is used with the disk scheduling is being referred as the disk bandwidth, which is the total number of bytes transferred divided by the total time between the first request for the service and the completion of the last transfer. And so whenever any IO request, as we have seen, whenever there is an IO request, the request will also specify the other pieces of information, like whether the operation is an input or the output operation, what is the disk address, what is the memory address for the transfer, where the disk content have to be saved in which part of the memory, and how many sectors have to be read in or how many sectors have to be written. And while performing this, when one request is completed, the operating system, it chooses which pending request to service next, and any one of several disk scheduling algorithms can be used for this purpose. The first of the algorithm is the simplest one, which is being referred as the first come first served scheduling. This is the simplest one, and which is going to schedule the request as and when as the order of their arrival. As the order of their arrival, here is an example for the first come first served. As we can see, there is a request, there is 8 requests, and if I currently assume the current position of the head is at the cylinder number 53, so while moving from 53 to the remaining tracks till the end, the head will service all the pending requests. The next one to be serviced will be 98, and after 98, the request will be serviced as their order of arrival or the order of the request. So now the next request to be serviced is 98, and then 183 will be serviced, then 37, then 122. This is the simplest one to implement, but the basic disadvantage of this is there can be more number of heads which have to be visited. The movement of head will be more with this particular approach. So the next approach used for scheduling is being referred as the shortest seek time first, SSTF algorithm. And while this is the algorithm which will the head position before moving the head far away to service the other request, and it selects the request with the least seek time from the current head position. So whichever the pending request, among the pending request, whichever is the nearest one or the shortest one which requires the shortest head movement, so that request will be serviced next with this particular approach. And this scheduling for this example, for the previous example, it's the same algorithm. This algorithm gives the head movements of only 236 cylinders, which is a quite improvement over the previous approach. The next one is being referred as the elevator algorithm or the scan scheduling, because the way this algorithm works is quite similar to the way how the elevator works. So it's been referred as the elevator algorithm, and the disk arm will start at one end of the disk and it moves towards the other end, servicing request as it reaches each cylinder until it gets to the other end of the disk. At the other end, direction of the head movement will be reversed, and it services all remaining requests. So in this example, the moving is towards 0, and that the initial head position is again at 53. The head will next service 37. While the head moves from 53 to 0, it gives service to the pending request. Like it will give service to 37 and then 14, and at the cylinder 0, arm will reverse and will move towards the other end of the disk, servicing the request at 65, 67, 98 and so far. And the other algorithm, which is being referred as a circular scan scheduling, it's a variant of the scan designed to provide a more uniform wait time for the request. So it moves the head from one end of the disk to the other. It's servicing the request along the way. When the head reaches the other end, it immediately returns to the beginning of the disk without servicing any request on the return trip. This is what we can see in the diagram. So the head will move, the head will move from 53 to, it will service all the pending requests till it reaches the end, and at the end it will again come back to the 0th cylinder, and then it will service the remaining request. So this is the C-scan algorithm, which is a variant for this is the circular scan, which is a variant for the scan scheduling. So out of these four algorithms, the optimal is the one which is with the shortest seek time, that works with an optimization. And basically the scan algorithms have been designed to provide a uniform wait time for the request. So we'll end up today's lecture with these things, and we'll try to have a next video lecture related to the shell scripting, which I will be recording soon and I will be sharing with all the students. Thank you.